In the heart of Bavaria, far from the noise of the city, there was a small, isolated farm. It was called Hinterkaifeck. The year was 1922. The world was changing, but out here time seemed to stand still. The farm was home to the Gruber family, a household shrouded in local gossip and secrets. There was the patriarch Andreas Gruber, a stern and often difficult man. His wife, Casilia, lived a quiet life beside him. Their widowed daughter, Victoria, and her two young children, Casilia and Joseph, completed the family. It was a place of hard work and solitude, where the nearest neighbor was more than a kilometer away, a place where a cry for help might never be heard. The Grubers were known for being private, almost reclusive. They kept to themselves, their world confined to the fields and buildings of their own land. Andreas was not well liked in the nearby village of Kaifeck. Whispers followed him about his temper and his controlling nature. Victoria was the subject of much speculation herself, particularly concerning the father of her youngest child, little Joseph. Life on the farm was a closed loop of daily chores, a predictable rhythm of seasons, but in the winter of 1922, that rhythm was about to be broken. Something was amiss at Hinterkaifeck, a subtle but persistent feeling that they were no longer alone on their remote patch of earth. The farm itself was a character in this story, a collection of buildings, a house, a barn, a shed, all connected, a small fortress against the harsh Bavarian winters. It was a place that should have felt safe, a sanctuary built by family hands, but safety is a fragile thing. The very isolation that defined their lives would soon become their greatest vulnerability. The sprawling fields that surrounded them, covered in a blanket of late March snow, offered no protection. Instead, they held a silent record of an unwelcome visitor, a sign that the world outside had found its way to their door, bringing with it a chilling and deadly intent. And so the stage was set. A family living on the edge of society, a remote homestead cut off from the world, and a growing sense of unease that something was terribly wrong. No one could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. No one could have imagined that this quiet, unassuming farm would become the setting for one of Germany's most infamous and baffling unsolved crimes. The story of Hinterkaifeck is not just about a murder. It's about the terrifying idea that the danger you fear might already be inside, watching and waiting. It's a question that lingers, even now. Who was watching the Grubers? The terror didn't begin with a sudden act of violence. It started slowly, with a series of strange and unsettling events that chipped away at the family's sense of security. It began with footprints. One day, Andreas Gruber discovered a single set of tracks in the fresh snow. They led from the dense forest at the edge of his property directly to the farmhouse, but there were no tracks leading away. It was as if the visitor had simply vanished into thin air. He searched the entire property, the barn, the sheds, but found no one. The intruder had come, but they had not left. Then came the sounds. From the attic, the family started hearing footsteps at night, creaks and shuffles from the space directly above where they slept. Andreas climbed up to investigate, but the attic was always empty. Yet the sounds continued, a ghostly presence that shared their home. Around the same time, the house keys mysteriously disappeared. A set of keys that could unlock the doors to their home was simply gone. The feeling of being watched intensified. Someone, it seemed, could come and go as they pleased, a phantom moving through the shadows of their own home. Adding to the mystery, a strange newspaper appeared on the property. It was a paper from Munich, one the Grubers did not subscribe to and had never seen before. Who had left it there? And why? It was another calling card from their unseen tormentor, another sign that their isolation had been breached. The family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived on the final day of March, just hours before the tragedy. The previous maid had fled the farm 6 months earlier, convinced the house was haunted. She had heard voices and felt a presence she couldn't explain, a chilling premonition of the darkness to come. Andreas told neighbors and friends about these strange occurrences, but he refused to go to the police. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps he believed he could handle the situation himself. He spoke of hearing a man's voice in the barn and finding unfamiliar scratches on the tool shed lock, signs of a failed break-in. He was a man on edge, aware of a threat he could not see or name. He and his family were living in a state of quiet siege, trapped in their own home with a growing fear. They were waiting for something to happen, never imagining the true scale of the horror that was about to be unleashed. The night of March 31st, 1922, was cold and dark. The farm was silent, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. The killer, it is believed, had been living in their attic for days, perhaps even weeks, learning their routines, listening to their conversations, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment arrived on that fateful Friday evening. The first lure was to the barn. Investigators theorized that a noise, perhaps a loose cow or a strange sound, drew the family members out one by one. It was a simple but brutally effective trap. Andreas Gruber likely went first, followed by his wife Casilia, and then their daughter Victoria. In the dim, hay-filled confines of the barn, they met their end. The weapon was a pickaxe, a common farm tool, turned into an instrument of unimaginable violence. Each one was struck down, their lives extinguished in the very place they worked every day. After them, young Casilia, only 7 years old, was lured to the barn. She too was killed. The methodical nature of the attack is one of its most chilling aspects. The killer worked with a cold, patient precision, eliminating the family in a place where their cries would be muffled by thick wooden walls and stacks of hay. 4 members of the family now lay dead in the barn, but the killer was not finished. The work of death continued inside the house. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, was slain in her bedchamber, and finally the youngest victim, 2-year-old Josef, was killed as he slept in his bassinet in his mother's room. The entire household, 6 people spanning 3 generations, had been wiped out. The crime scene was a portrait of absolute devastation, a silent testament to a night of calculated and ruthless slaughter. The peace of Hinterkaifeck had been shattered forever, replaced by a profound and terrifying mystery. What happened in those moments? What was said? Did they see their attacker? These are questions that have no answers. The scene in the barn suggested a deliberate, sequential attack. The killer had managed to draw 4 adults and a child out of the house without raising a general alarm. This suggests a terrifying level of cunning and control. It wasn't a crime of passion, a chaotic explosion of rage. It was an execution. And with the final life taken, the killer was now the sole occupant of the silent, blood-stained farmhouse. The longest night was over, but a new, even stranger chapter was about to begin. The most unsettling detail of the Hinterkaifeck case is what happened after the murders. The killer did not flee. For several days following the massacre, the murderer lived in the house, amongst the bodies of the victims. Neighbors noticed smoke rising from the chimney. The cattle and other farm animals were fed and cared for. Someone ate food from the kitchen and slept in one of the beds. The family dog was tied up outside, just as it always was. From the outside, it might have seemed as if life at Hinterkaifeck was carrying on as usual. But inside, it was a house of the dead, presided over by a ghost who was very much alive. Days passed. The younger Casilia didn't show up for school. The family missed Sunday church services. Mail began to pile up. It wasn't until April 4th, 4 days after the murders, that a search party of concerned neighbors decided to investigate. When they entered the barn, they made the gruesome discovery. The bodies of Andreas, his wife Victoria, and his granddaughter were found partially covered with hay. Inside the house, they found the maid and the infant Josef. The entire community was plunged into shock and terror. Who could have done such a monstrous thing? And, more terrifyingly, where were they now? The investigation that followed was extensive, but ultimately fruitless. Over 100 suspects were questioned over the years, but no one was ever charged. Theories abounded: a robbery gone wrong, a crime of passion involving a secret lover of Victoria, a political assassination, or revenge from a former farmhand. Yet none of the theories could fully explain the bizarre circumstances. Why would a robber stay to feed the cows? Why would a lover kill an entire family, including a 2-year-old child? The killer's behavior, both before and after the crime, defied all logical explanation, leaving police baffled. Today, more than a century later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. The farm was demolished in 1923, a year after the crime, as if to erase the terrible stain from the landscape. But the story endures, a dark piece of German folklore that continues to fascinate and horrify. It is a chilling reminder that the greatest threat may not be the stranger lurking in the dark woods, but the one who has already crossed the threshold, who knows the sounds of your house, and who waits patiently for the perfect moment The questions left behind at Hinterkaifeck are the kind that never go away, echoing through time. Who was the phantom of the farm, and could they still be out there?